Hello my dear students, welcome to this next session of moving charges and magnetism. And in this particular session, as I was mentioning to you in my previous session, today we will take a look at limitations of a cyclotron first and foremost thing. Then after learning the limitations, we will take a look at the one derivation, that is force due to a current carrying conductor placed in a magnetic field. This is second one. These are the two things that we will see initially. Okay, so firstly, let us take a look at the limitations of a cyclotron. Okay, so limitations of cyclotron. Now, first and foremost thing, let us recall back what is a cyclotron. Cyclotron is a device that is used to accelerate heavy positively charged particles. Correct? But over there in the definition we never mentioned about lighter particles and negative particles or neutral particles. Correct? We have mentioned only about heavy positively charged particles. So in fact, that happens to be the limitation of a cyclotron. So first and foremost thing, first limitation, a cyclotron cannot be used for lighter particles like electrons. Okay, so if we consider, so cannot be used for accelerating lighter particles. Now, why? Let us try to understand that. Now, lighter particles are considered like an electron. Okay, so if I consider an electron, the particles like electron, these tend to obey Einstein's mass equation. Now, what is this meaning? According to Einstein's theory, any particle which travels closer to the speed of light, its mass will get enhanced. This is Einstein's theory. So, according to Einstein's theory, we know that suppose if m is the mass and m0 is the rest mass. Rest mass in the sense the particle traveling at a speed very much below the speed of light. That mass is m0. It is called as rest mass. Okay, so m is equal to m0 divided by square root of 1 minus v square divided by c square. Now, here v is the speed of that particle and c is speed of light in vacuum. So, this is speed of the particle. Speed of the particle. Okay, and c is obviously speed of light in vacuum, which is 3 into 10 raised to 8 meter per second. Fine. So, this is the notation that we have. Now, my dear friends, here if speed of the particle becomes closer to the speed of light, under that situation we tend to see that the mass increases. Now let us consider here V equal to C. If I put V equal to C, what happens here? It becomes 1 minus C square by C square, which is 1 minus 1, which is 0. So anything divided by 0 is what? Infinity. So obviously m equal to infinite times of m0. So does it not mean that the mass got increased infinitesimally large to a large value? Correct? So according to this particular theory, hence we tend to see that any lighter particle like electron or positron, okay, what they will do is when they start gaining the speed, okay, their rest mass gets nullified and its mass keeps on increasing. Mass becomes larger and larger. And under this situation, my dear friends, what happens that we will just see. Now, when V increases, when velocity of the lighter particle increases, then very clearly what happens here? Mass will also increase. Mass will increase, correct? If mass increases, then what is time taken by a particle in a cyclotron? Time taken by a particle in a cyclotron to travel 1 d will be what? So let us take total time only. Pi into mp, pi into m divided by q into b, correct? Pi m by qb is the time. Now, if mass increases, what happens to time here? Time will also increase. So this implies p will increase. That means the particle like electron, instead of taking lesser and lesser time to travel through the d's of cyclotron, its time to travel through the d's becomes large. So finally what happens here? Our main purpose is lost, no? Because we are using cyclotron to accelerate the particle. But here, instead, what is happening? Here mass is increasing, and because of that reason, time is increasing. If time increases, obviously the particle will not speed up at all. Its speed is less. It keeps on becoming lesser and lesser. So that is why I cannot make use of cyclotron to accelerate lighter particles. So this is one limitation that you can remember. Okay. Now, second limitation we consider, limitation number 2 for cyclotron. This is in relation to limitation number 2. It cannot be used to accelerate the particles which do not have charge. So that means particles without charge, without any charge. What is the meaning of it? Any particle which does not have a charge, that cannot be accelerated. For example, we have neutron. Neutron is a classic example for chargeless particles, correct? So I cannot make use of a cyclotron to accelerate a chargeless particle like a neutron, because over there that alternating electric field in the cyclotron will not affect this neutron charged particle at all, correct? So accordingly, we cannot make use of a cyclotron to accelerate particles like neutron. Okay. Then third limitation, a cyclotron cannot be set to a large magnetic field value so that I can get very large amount of kinetic energy. The cyclotron's kinetic energy range is limited. It cannot cross certain limit, and hence I can say that cannot be used under large magnetic field. Large magnetic field. Cannot be used under large magnetic field, and this large magnetic field will essentially produce what? Larger kinetic energy, and this larger kinetic energy we cannot obtain in case of cyclotron. Okay, then you may ask me what device we can use, sir? Obviously we can make use of a device called synchrotron. Okay, synchrotron. A synchrotron is a favorite device for producing larger kinetic energy than cyclotron. Okay, so these are three important limitations for a cyclotron. I hope the limitations are clear to you all. Okay, so now let's proceed to our next part, that is force on a current carrying conductor placed in a uniform magnetic field. Okay, so let us take a look at that. Now let's take a look at our next part, that is force on a current carrying conductor placed in a uniform magnetic field. So that is our next part, and this is a derivation, my dear friends. And this formula what we derive, it will be utilized in many more derivations in the future. Okay, so let's take a look at this derivation now. Now to derive this, first and foremost thing, let us draw a diagram. I will show conductor like this, one particular conductor. Okay, and this conductor I will take its length as L. Length of the conductor is L here, and this is the axis of the conductor which I am marking here. Now let us draw the magnetic field. Now let me consider the magnetic field in which the conductor is placed is like this. Let me consider like this. I am considering the magnetic field here. Let me mark this magnetic field as vector B here. Okay, and here let the direction of the current in the conductor be like this. I will take direction of current in this way. Okay, and here I will show one electron. One electron I will show, and this electron, as we already know that the electron always travels opposite to the direction of current. So obviously this is negatively charged electron, its direction is opposite to the current here, and I will mark this vector as Vd, drift velocity of the electron, vector Vd. So here we are showing what all things I hope you have come to know. We are showing magnetic field, we are showing a conductor of length L and current flowing through the conductor. Then most importantly I will show the angle made by the conductor with the magnetic field. So angular inclination of the conductor or inclination of the length with the magnetic field is theta. Now these are the primary things that we should consider in the diagram. Okay, now without much ado, now let's move on to the derivation. So let us make some assumptions here. So I will say let. Now let me assume for the length. So we will say let L is equal to, let L is equal to length of the conductor, length of the conductor, okay. Then we will consider current carried by conductor as I. I is equal to current carried by the conductor. Current carried by the conductor is I here. Okay. Then I will assume drift velocity of the electron. So Vd is equal to drift velocity of the electron. Drift velocity of the electron, and then I take D as magnitude of the magnetic field. So it is magnetic field here. B is magnetic field. Okay. Then I assume theta. Theta is equal to angle made by, or I'll say angle of inclination with angle of inclination of the conductor with magnetic field. I'll show magnetic field as vector B. Okay, so with vector B. So these are the things that we have assumed now. Okay, then one more thing we should add in this particular assumption. I'll take A is equal to area of cross section of the conductor. Area of cross section of the conductor is capital A here. So these are the assumptions that I am making in order to proceed with the derivation, and we should also assume about number density. So that I will write somewhere here. I'll write n is equal to number density of electrons it is. Okay, so number density means what? Number of electrons per unit volume. So that is what we are assuming here as small n. Now let us proceed to the derivation quickly. I think I can erase these all things. I hope you would have written it already. So now let's proceed to the next part on the derivation. So in order to derive, first and foremost thing what we'll do is, this diagram I am keeping as it is for our reference. Okay, so here what I will do is I will calculate force on the electron, one single electron. Then I will calculate total number of electrons. Then by calculating total number of electrons, I will calculate total force on all the electrons. Okay, so that is total force. Total force on all the electrons is nothing but force on the conductor. Do you agree on that? So this is the logic that we are going to adopt here. So I will say force on one electron. Force on one electron. I'll take this force on one electron as small f here, small f. Okay, or else I'll write this as Fe. Force on one electron is Fe here. Okay, and Fe can be calculated by using our famous magnetism formula. If you remember, I told you during my first discussion itself, that is QVB sin theta. So that is nothing but what? QVB sin theta, and here Q is equal to what? Charge on the electron. So hence in place of Q I will write it as what? EV into B sin theta. Fine. Now what is V here? V is the drift velocity of the electron, so I will write this as Vd. I hope it is clear. See here, Q is equal to E here. So I am making use of QVB sin theta. So thus it becomes E into Vd into D into sin theta. So that is what I have written here. So I have mentioned that also V is equal to Vd here. This is what we have written in the formula. This is force on one electron. Now let us go ahead and calculate total number of electrons. Total number of electrons, it can be calculated by using number density. Okay, so total number of electrons in the conductor. Total number of electrons in the conductor is equal to I take this total number of electrons as capital N, that is equal to number density into volume. Correct? So number density into volume I will write. Then what is number density? Number density is N that I have mentioned into volume is the area of cross section into length. Correct? So hence we get what? N into A into L as total number of electrons in the conductor. Okay? So therefore, what is the total force on this particular conductor then? Therefore, total force is equal to force on one electron multiplied by total number of electrons. So hence I will write Fe multiplied by total number of electrons, that is capital N. So hence it becomes what? EVP sin theta multiplied by NAL. So I will write this as NAL as total number of electrons. So I will mention it here. EVD into B into sin theta multiplied by N into A into L. NAL. N into A into L. So let us rearrange this. So I will write this as N E A V D into V sin theta. I hope it is clear. N E A V D into V sin theta into L. Now over here, as we all have learnt in current electricity chapter, N E A V D is nothing but what? Electric current. So hence let us replace this by current I. So that I will mention here. I will say, but N E A V D is equal to electric current I. So I is the current flowing through the conductor that we have already written in the beginning. So I will mention that is equal to I. So very clearly we get this as what? I into L into B into sin theta. So therefore total force F will become equal to what? I L B sin theta. Now this is the formula that we are looking for. So F is equal to ILB sin theta. This is scalar form or this is the magnitude. Then vectorially we can write this as vector F is equal to I into vector L cross vector B. Now vector L cross vector B is LB sin theta. No? So that is what we are mentioning here. So vector F is equal to I into vector L into vector B is the vector form of this particular equation. I hope the derivation is clear to you all. Now this is the force exerted on a current carrying conductor placed in a uniform magnetic field. I hope this derivation is clear to you all. Okay. So now without much ado, now let's proceed to our next part. Okay. Now let's take a look at the special cases for the formula that we have derived. Okay, and we know the formula is ILB sin theta. So let us take special cases for this particular formula. So we have F is equal to what? ILB sin theta. Now special case number 1, if angle between magnetic field and the length is 90 degree, that means if theta is equal to 90 degree, under that situation F becomes equal to what? ILB sin 90. Now sin 90 is 1, so therefore F becomes equal to what? ILB. So this can be the maximum force. So I'll write this as F max. So this is the maximum force that we can expect from the conductor, and the conductor can have an exertion of maximum force by the magnetic field if the conductor is placed perpendicular to the magnetic field. That means, suppose I place the conductor like this. Suppose this is the conductor and the magnetic field is acting like this. Then, as you can notice here, length is measured like this, no? So, hence, angle between the length and the magnetic field is 90 degree here. So, due to that reason, in this configuration, the conductor can have a maximum magnetic force or maximum force due to the magnetic field. So, this is special case number 1. And special case number 2. If theta is equal to 0 degree or 180 degree. That means if we place the conductor parallel to the magnetic field, then under that situation, what we get here, my dear friends? We will get F is equal to ILB into sine 0 or sine 180. Now we know that sine 0 is 0, sine 180 is also 0. Then under this situation, we will get ILB into 0, which is equal to 0. So this I take it as minimum value of the force. So hence minimum is 0, maximum force that can be exerted on the conductor is ILB. So these are the two special cases, and the second special case is like this: when I place the conductor along the magnetic field like this, then under this situation the conductor will have 0 force. Okay, so this is one important thing that we should remember. In order to have a 0 force on a conductor being placed in the magnetic field, always place the conductor along the magnetic field or parallel to the magnetic field or anti-parallel to the magnetic field. And secondly, if you want to have a maximum force on a conductor, always place that conductor perpendicular to the magnetic field. And that maximum force is I into L into P. So this is about the special cases that I was talking about. Now, quickly, let's move on to the rule that can provide us the direction of the force. Okay, suppose in this situation, what is the direction of the force? That I just want to understand. Then we should always apply a rule called Fleming's left hand rule. So let's take a look at that particular Fleming's left hand rule. Fleming's left hand rule, and for application of the rule, I am just considering this diagram itself. Okay, this is magnetic field direction, and I will take the current direction like this. I take the current direction in this way. Current direction in this way. Okay, so according to Fleming's left hand rule, if we stretch the forefinger, middle finger and thumb of our left hand in mutually perpendicular direction like this. Okay, so this is the stretching that we should understand first. Okay, such that if the forefinger points in the direction of the magnetic field, forefinger points in the direction of the magnetic field, and middle finger points in the direction of the current. Middle finger points in the direction of current, and then the thumb will always provide me the direction of the force. I'll just repeat once again. Forefinger, middle finger and thumb of your left hand are stretched mutually perpendicular to each other like this, such that if forefinger is pointing in the direction of the magnetic field or along the magnetic field, and middle finger is pointing along the current, then thumb will always point or give the direction of the force. So this is Fleming's left hand rule, and I'll just schematically mention that. Now this is the left hand stretching I am making here. So as you can understand, fine. I think this is okay. So this is thumb that I am showing here. This is the forefinger here, and this is the current direction. That means it is the middle finger. And here we have thumb. I hope you can make this out. See here, forefinger, middle finger, and thumb. So in this way, now let us repeat that Fleming's left hand rule. If we stretch the forefinger, middle finger, and thumb of our left hand mutually perpendicular to each other, such that if forefinger points in the direction of the magnetic field, middle finger points in the direction of the current, then thumb will point in the direction of what? Force. It will point me the direction of the force acting on the conductor. So this is Fleming's left hand rule. I think it is clear. Fine. Now let me just apply Fleming's left hand rule in this case. See here, forefinger, I'll point forefinger along the direction of the magnetic field. So this is the direction of the magnetic field here. Then current is traveling downward like this. Okay. So middle finger is pointing along the current. As you can notice here, it is pointing along the current. Forefinger along the direction of the magnetic field. Then thumb will point the direction of the force. That means the force acting on the conductor will be what? Mutually perpendicular to, it will be perpendicularly outward to the board. So if you just draw this diagram on your notebook, the force will be directed along a direction perpendicularly outward to your page of the notebook. So that is what it means. Now let me just consider this plane here. So here, this is the direction of magnetic field, this is the direction of the current. Then here, thumb will point the force like this. This is the direction of the force, perpendicularly outward. I hope this particular explanation suits to your understanding. So you just draw various configurations of conductor and practice this diagram. Okay, this particular Fleming's left hand rule, I think you should master over it. Fine. Now with this particular note, I will be closing today's topic of discussion, my dear friends. And in my next session, I will be covering the force between two parallel conductors. Okay. Then I will be talking about magnetic dipole moment due to a circular loop. Okay. Then we will make one derivation on Bohr's magneton. That will be our next session, my dear friends. So until then, kindly practice whatever you have learned today. Be thorough with each of them, and for any further doubts or queries, kindly contact me back, revert back to me. And until then, stay safe, have a nice time, have a happy learning. Thank you.